In the 9th year of the reign of Emperor Nikephoros, the Emperor Nikephoros himself invaded Bulgaria, wanting to obliterate it, so he expected. He took with him his son Storakios and his son-in-law Mikhail, as well as all the patricians and commanders and dignitaries, all the regiments, and also the sons of the commanders who were aged 15 or above, whom he formed into a retinue for his son, which gave him the name Worthies. When he had entered the defiles, the Bulgars learned of the size of the army he brought with him, and since apparently they were unable to resist, they abandoned everything they had with them and fled into the mountains. Then Nikephoros entered and encamped in the palace of the first man of Bulgaria, named Krum, and finding there an army of hand-picked and armed Bulgars who had been left behind to guard the place, up to 12,000, he engaged battle with them and killed them all. Next, in similar fashion, he faced another 50,000 in battle, and having clashed with them, destroyed them all. Consequently, the wretched man's spirit and heart were engorged with pride, because thus far he had achieved this by his own righteous deeds. As he said to those accompanying him, "Behold," he said, "what righteous accomplishments." Thus entering Krum's palace, he searched for his treasures and found great spoils which he commanded be distributed among his army as per the troop roster, that is, copper coins and cloves and various other items. When he opened the storehouses of Krum's wine, he distributed it so that everyone could drink his fill. Strolling up the paths of the palace and walking on the terraces of the house, he exulted and exclaimed, "Behold, God has given me all of this, and I want to found here a city which bears my name, so that I am renowned in all succeeding generations." Having spent several days there, he left impious Krum's palace, and on his departure burnt all the buildings and the surrounding wall, which were built of wood. Next, not concerned with a swift departure, he marched through the midst of Bulgaria, wanting to reach Sardica, for he thought that he had destroyed all of Bulgaria. After he had spent 15 days entirely neglecting his affairs, and his wits and judgment departed him, he was no longer himself, but was completely confused. Seized by the torpor of false pretension, he no longer left his tent nor gave anyone instruction or order. Some men inveighed against him and sent his son to talk to him about leaving there. But he took no heed at all, and instead insulted his son and wanted to hit him. The army, therefore, seizing the opportunity, plundered unsparingly, burning the fields that were not harvested. They hamstrung cows and ripped the tendons from their loins as the animals wailed loudly and struggled convulsively. They slaughtered sheep and pigs and committed impermissible acts. Next, those who observed Nikephoros' disorder and incoherence, and that nobody dared speak to him, began little by little to desert and make off by ruses. The Bulgars had constructed a fearsome and impenetrable fence out of tree trunks, in the manner of a wall. Therefore, the Bulgars seized their opportunity, observing from the mountains that those who had deserted Nikephoros' army were wandering. They hired the Avars and neighbouring Slav tribes, arming even women like men, and on the 15th day since the Byzantines' invasion, as Saturday dawned on the 23rd of July, they fell on those still half asleep, who arose and, arming themselves in haste, joined battle. But since the regiments were encamped a great distance from one another, they did not know immediately what was happening. The Bulgars and their allies fell only upon the imperial encampment, which began to be cut to pieces. When few resisted, and none strongly, but many were slaughtered, the rest who saw it gave themselves to flight. At this same time, there was also a river that was very swampy and difficult to cross. When they did not immediately find a ford to cross the river, pursued by the enemy, the Byzantines threw themselves into the river. Entering with their horses and not being able to get out, they sank into the swamp and were trampled by those coming from behind. And some men fell on the others, so that the river was so full of men and horses that the enemies crossed on top of them unharmed and pursued the rest, who, as was reasonable, thought they had come through safely. Here, therefore, all the patricians and other commanders fell. Those who had thought they had escaped the carnage of the river came up against the fence that the Bulgars had constructed, which was strong and exceedingly difficult to cross. Since they were not able to break through it with their horses, they abandoned their horses and, having climbed up with their own hands and feet, hurled themselves headlong on the other side. But there was a deep excavated trench on the other side, so that those who hurled themselves from the top broke their limbs. Some of them died immediately, while the others progressed a short distance, but did not have the strength to walk, but fell to the ground and died, tormented by hunger and thirst. In other places, men set fire to the fence, and when the bonds which held the logs together burned through, the fence collapsed above the trench. Those fleeing were unexpectedly thrown down and fell into the pits of the trench of fire, both themselves and their horses. This was a worse misfortune than the peril of the river. Who on hearing these things will not weep? Who will not lament? For the children of the old and new commanders, who were numerous and in the very flower of youth, with bodies of peaceful paleness and hair and beards of shimmering fairness, and a face with beautiful features, some of whom were recently married to women distinguished by nobility and beauty, they all died there. Some were killed by the sword, some drowned in the river, some hurled headlong from the fence, some burned by the fire in the trench, and the few who survived, nearly all of them died after the journey home. On that same day, the Emperor Nikephoros was killed during the first assault, and nobody is able to relate the manner of his death. Injured also was his son Storakios, who suffered a mortal wound to the spine vertebrae, from which he died after having ruled the Romans for 2 months. Many of the surviving Romans, after the battle ended, were forced by the impious Bulgars, who had then not yet been baptized, to renounce Christ and embrace the error of the Scythian pagans. Those who were preserved by the power of Christ endured every outrage by various torments earned by the martyr's crown. In this way, the Emperor Nikephoros, through thoughtlessness and false pretension, killed himself and the whole Roman army, having reigned 8 years and 7 months. He was a man above average height, broad with a fat paunch, shaggy hair, prominent lips, and a large face with a big greying beard. His body was stout, his thoughts extremely prudent, clever and astute, especially in affairs of state. He was also a penurious and misery to excess. Because of this, he was condemned to eternal damnation. And so, brothers, let us remember our departed brothers and fathers, and supplicate our good and just God to protect us from such condemnation, and that we may through careful observance of the divine teachings of Christ attain the blessing promised to the righteous. Let him be praised and glorified forever and ever. Amen.